Okay, it is 8:30, and welcome to week 8 of Introduction to Corrections J115. And I told you earlier that the quarter would be moving pretty fast, and we're down to the point now where this is the next to the last lecture. The last lecture will be week 10, and many of you um, should be should have wrapped up, of course, week 7, your project, and then your final project will be due next week, at the end of next week, week 9. So very important. Those interviews should have been complete by now. Some of you have had problems. I'm aware of a few of you and working with you on that. But it is very important. I've stressed this from week 1, the importance of getting on this right away and not waiting until the week that the assignment is due to get something done. So anyway, I'm going to spend some time today going over the requirements for this week's assignments. Okay. There they are. Okay. So again, we're in week 8. Failing parole and what can be done. Your 10 points for identifying 2 or 3 of the top reasons parolees fail, and then offer some suggestions for success. So you get 20 points for doing those 2. If you do your citations and references, you will get the additional 5 points, along with your sentence structure and grammar. Make sure you write it in paragraphs, cover sheet, reference page as well. And of course, you know the rule about running your papers through Grammarly. So that is your written assignment for this week. Again, your project will be due next week. And then, again, pointing out that your last lecture will take place in week 10, which would be late for your course project to have been completed and submitted using the proper forms. Now, I know some students are going to say, how do I finish my project? Look at the rubric. There's a rubric for week 9. And also look at the module for week 9 also. It will tell you how to complete your project and what you're supposed to have in there. And so you want to make sure you satisfy all of those requirements. The announcement for this week, Section 7, 8, and 9 of the text, and then complete the activity defining parole and its issues. And then we're going to conclude with a conversation with a parole officer. It's a recording that I'll usually take my headset off so that you can hear it better. And then your discussion posts, parole violations, officers' roles were due last night. Initial posts, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time every Tuesday, and reply posts every Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And again, I encourage you to reply to more than one post. You don't get any additional points, but it helps make the sessions better. And then also, if you include citations, references, I let you know that I like those, and those are good also as well. Then your written assignment that I just went over a few minutes ago, and then you have the quiz. You have the quiz this week, and each of those are due Sunday, this Sunday coming up. And I'll go over that in just a second with the course calendar. So we're going to take a look at that right now. Course calendar. Here we are. Your reading assignment, giving the same information that's in your announcement, your initial post, same information in your announcement, your live lecture, same information in your announcement, and then your reply post. And then your written assignment according to the requirements of the rubric, and then your quiz. And again, 2 pages. It's a 2-page, why parolees fail and what can be done. And repeating the facts don't satisfy all the requirements. I'm interested in your critical thinking. You run your papers through Grammarly as well. Okay? And then you can see the following week that you will have your reading, your initial post, your reply post, a written assignment, and your final course project. And I say in here, make sure you review the requirements in Module 1 and 9, and the rubric for the final project as well. So that should guide you in terms of what to expect there. Week 8, which is now, we're talking about the topic of parole. Again, your assignments. I've already told you what they were. It's a 2-page. Explain 2 or 3 top reasons. 2 or 3 top reasons. And then discussion, as well as your quiz. Okay? It's a time quiz. So now let's go into the lesson content. So, talk about parole. So we're going to define parole as issues. We're going to have a conversation that you're going to conclude with a parole officer. And then I've already given you what the assignments are. So, as you already know, starting from the very beginning, that this is a course in corrections, and that one of the 4 areas that involve corrections is parole. And you should be aware of the fact that parole takes place different from probation. Probation is you hadn't served any time in jail, and then you serve your time outside. Parole, on the other hand, you have served a big portion of your time incarcerated, and that you're able to finish the rest of your time that you were sentenced to outside, starting with halfway house, and then eventually being able to do things to help you continue to blend in with society. Hopefully that the lessons that you learn from your mistake that caused you to be incarcerated will continue to have you move in different directions. So, there are rules and conditions that are set forth by the parole board, and the parole officer is the one who's going to enforce those to make sure that they're being satisfied. And the individual has to report on a regular basis to the parole officer, and that person is under the jurisdiction of the state until they complete their the remainder of their sentence. And of course, it says if you violate those terms, there is a possibility that you can be returned to serve the remaining portion of your release. Now, some of the conditions are that you don't do drugs or alcohol, that you don't hang around with felons, that you obey the laws of the land, you don't possess a firearm. You also, again, regularly report to your parole officer. Now, a lot of states have begun to move away from the term parole. In Illinois, mandatory supervised release But the key idea is that it works the same way. Some jurisdictions now are doing away with parole. They're using the term, but there's still some form where individuals are able to be released after serving a certain percentage of their time and still subjected to the state, and the state maintains jurisdiction over that person. Probably one of the most well-known paroles took place some months ago when O.J. Simpson was released, and it was on TV. You can even Google it, and you'll be able to see the the parole hearing. And usually at parole hearings, that there is someone objecting to parole, and oftentimes there is a victim and or a prosecutor. Well, in that O.J. Simpson case, there was a victim there, but the victim was saying that he had served enough time and that it should be released. And there was no prosecutor as well. But in most instances, there is, and that kind of thing. Parole is either discretionary or mandatory. In the case of indeterminate sentencing, it's discretionary. It's up to the parole board as to when that person is released. If it's mandatory, then there's a certain percentage that the individual has served without being in trouble and has done well, and it's set out that that individual is then placed on parole. And again, the parole board determines who and when discretionary parole takes place. The board is also the authority to revoke the parole. Like probation, parole is considered a privilege and not a right. Now, if you have determinate sentencing, then you do get into the point where it may be a right after serving a certain period of time. Parolees are entitled to hearings or due process hearings before their parole is revoked, including the right to check the evidence that's used against them, opportunity to be heard, representative by a lawyer or someone they designate, and to right to cross-examine witnesses, and the hearing body is supposed to be neutral, and receives a written statement to determine what the violation is. So basic due process rights are granted to individuals who are on parole who may find themselves in situations. And the parole officer, as I said earlier, operates almost the same way as a probation officer. They monitor the compliance with the conditions and rules that were set out by the parole board. And the idea is to try to get that individual heading in the right direction. It is not something that the parole officer looks to try to reincarcerate somebody, but it depends on the circumstances. Just some violations, minor violations, don't always result in reincarceration. So, parolees may be subjected to intensive probation or intensive supervision, I should say. In other words, they might have a monitor on them, some kind of tracking device or GPS, and they also receive from the parole officer assistance with employment opportunities, education, and help them with life skills, counseling and treatment, particularly if the individual is a drug person. Help them to get into programs. And usually one of the conditions of parole in situations where a person has drug problems is to receive the treatment and to go to those treatments and document that and report that back to the parole officer. And that's a good thing because it's helping that individual to head in another direction. And also to be there to help them deal with family issues. make sure they have a stable place to stay and that they're not, moving all over the place. The bottom line is that the parole officer needs to know the residence of that individual during the entire probation or parole period. Now, we talked about this earlier, but parolees often fail because of some of the issues. They don't follow the instructions. But the key thing with most parolees is that parolees who generally have substance abuse problems or alcohol problems oftentimes find themselves back because they don't get the adequate amount of help in a timely fashion. There are some budgetary issues that many jurisdictions face in terms of being able to properly provide for the needs of individuals who find themselves with drug problems and alcohol problems. But as it says here, that the same risk, need, and responsibility issues to parolees that also apply to probationers. So they have the same kind of situation. Parole, though, is much more effective when support is given and programs are in place, such as education, housing, employment, job training, social networking, and connecting with family members themselves. Now, there could be some problems with connecting with some family members if, for example, that individual is from a family that is a criminal family or a crime family or has a large number of individuals who commit crimes, they might have a problem there. They might have a problem. But usually there are some members of the family who have not gotten in trouble that can offer support and guide that individual in a direction to keep him from being reincarcerated. So the key thing is be aware and understanding parole, that the difference in probation and parole is very simple. Parole, you've served some time, and now you're released to spend the rest of your time in the community. In probation, you are not incarcerated, but you are given an opportunity to get into the community. So with that, I've given you all the issues that are relating to parole and how it operates. Those of you who are doing papers should have done some extensive research and included information concerning that. And so I'm going to take off my headset. That will change the setup, so give me a second here. So now let's put you on to listening to parole.
My name is Lance Cobra with the Minnesota Department of Corrections. Department of Corrections. I started as a probation officer, working with adult misdemeanors and juvenile and all that misdemeanor felonies. But I did that position for many years, becoming a supervisory release probation officer, working mainly with adults, solely with adults. Did that for many years before I took my position that I work with now as a supervisory release agent. And
prison in order to participate in this boot camp.
That's correct. I am a supervised release agent now. My primary, I work mainly and only with people on release from prisons.
Okay, what are the qualifications to do your position?
The qualifications to be a what's called a corrections agent are a 4-year degree in corrections or an equivalent background such as sociology, psychology, also an internship of 400 hours or equivalent work such as including prison investigations, case management. You might look at other types of employment such as case manager within the institution and other case management type jobs within other social work type jobs in the state.
Is there a typical day for you?
Yes. Some days are very typical. You wake up, you get dressed, you check your vehicle. All of our contacts, all of our work is in the community. We operate out as a supervised release agent. We work out of the car. The car is set up like an office. It has a laptop. It looks like a lot like a squad car. We review previous days or from the last time we worked current notes that were inputted on all clients. I have a lot of to-do list that never seems to go away, and just gets longer and longer each day. Review that, and then basically start setting up a contact list of the people I'm going to see for that day. Load up my car, check my vehicle before I leave, and then head out onto the road.
So once you're on the road, are visits typical home because you're at their home, correct?
In their home, workplaces, and any place that they talk to an agent about. It could be a community service site, it could be a support group meeting.
Okay. So what might happen at a visit?
In a typical home contact, an agent will typically walk through the residence to make sure that everything is status quo, there's nothing out of the ordinary going on. Once that's been established, we start to work on basically the housekeeping things. What conditions have you met to this point? The standard conditions, a lot of we went through the community service treatment, things like that. We discuss those housekeeping things. Then we start looking at case management, looking at things that the clients are interested in, and some of their high-risk needs and areas, and start addressing some of those needs and start planning for the future in hopes of addressing some of the problems that have in the past in order to prevent those from being problems in the future.
Okay, so are there ever like violation issues or safety issues for you?
Absolutely. Every day is a safety issue, not only for us within the home of our clients, their peers and associates within the home, but also for us, and for a lot of people, like people from the surrounding the community. I have to spend a lot of time in working in Minneapolis, which I think a lot of people are aware is an area for violence. So you always have to have situational awareness in regards to what's going on around you. We are trained in agency training courses in order to reduce the incidence of safety issues with agents, not putting yourself in a position where a client has locked in the escalation skills. If something is going south, or if something starts to look bad, you're able to work that through a manner that escalates the problem down to hopefully a lower level.
Okay. We have talked about release of offenders and some of the barriers and issues that they face. Do you see that with the population you work with?
Yes. These individuals have gone to prison with not much care to their lives. They don't have 401k plans. They don't have retirement plans. They haven't had. Some of them never even worked a job for any length of time whatsoever. And so when they're released, those
them on those issues? You help with those issues also?
I do. Not necessarily directly with the clients in regards to their individual housing needs, but we are always in search of a different housing in the areas that we supervise. That is one of our mission statements. That's one of our goals as agents is to find suitable housing for clients that we use on a regular basis. Those individuals who don't otherwise have housing. There are a lot of programs out there, especially in the metro areas, that are willing to help.
Okay. Touched on violations earlier, but we talked about the violation process, and it's a little bit different than going to court. Can you talk about the hearing process and maybe your role as an agent during that process?
An agent plays a dual role in that process. Although the agents in the home working with the client to assist them in their facilitation of a better life, when it comes to a violation in a hearing, an agent becomes a prosecutor. And in that the hearing is set up typically at jails. So let's start from the beginning. If an agent comes into a situation and the client is found in a violation situation, an ISR agent does carry handcuffs, and at that point makes the determination as to whether or not they're going to place that person in custody. They can do it themselves, or they can call for backup from local law enforcement, which is always advised. In most situations, as an ISR, I tend to work the situation myself because that's not been too much of a problem for me so far. But anyway, when the violation occurs, the client is placed in custody. A warrant is issued for their arrest through the officer of the day. That is placed in the I typically transport the client to the local jail. At that point, establish a report based on that violation and any other violations that may be out there. That report is submitted to Minnesota, the Department of Corrections Hearings and Release Unit, and the State Public Defender's Office. A hearing is scheduled, and those three parties come together: the client, the hearings and release officer, and the public defender. The agent is also there and acts as the prosecutor or the prosecutor. They present evidence to show that the client has violated their conditions of release. The defense attorney, of course, defends the client. Then the hearing officer weighs the decision to determine whether or not there's been a preponderance of evidence to show that that client violated their conditions of release. And if they have, whether or not the violation is sufficient enough to send back to the institution, restructure them, or dismiss. Restructure would be adding new conditions, addressing the fact that there was a violation, finding that there is a suitable cause to put accountability into place, or to put other aspects of it. Such a client using drugs may be considered for a evaluation of possible further treatment program to assist them in that behavior.
So sometimes intermediate sanctions can be used instead of reincarceration.
Intermediate sanctions are agents will have at their disposal in the field, and what they'll do is it acts like a ramification within the institution, but without the hearing officers. The agent will ask the client if they're willing to participate in this program, and at that point, the client may be willing to engage in those things that we talked about in the restructure, such as further chemical dependency programming, and it gives a sanction that would be a loss of privileges, a even volunteer go on to an electronic monitor to address accountability issues.
Okay. And you mentioned a hearing officer. Is that like a parole board in other states?
It would be like, I think a parole board would be set up more in a factor of having multiple individuals at a table evaluating a person's adjustment to the institution. I think it's more like the judge. So in this particular case, I would equate it more to the judge's role. They weigh both sides of the evidence from the defense attorney lays out their side of the story, the client lays out his information, and then the probation officer, parole officer, ISR agent lays out their violation. The hearing officer slash what I would consider the judge takes all that information in, determines whether or not that person is in violation or not. The sanction is a resolution comes after that from that hearing officer slash judge.
Okay.
It's an administrative position.
Okay.
It's on an administrative hearing.
Okay. Do you have advice for students today who are interested in this field?
This is, as everybody knows, the community, the state is suffering significant losses in revenue, and jobs are hard to find in the field. My best advice for who are coming in the field is volunteer. Get into the agencies, do pre-sentence investigations, do case management, work with kids, get to know people in the field. Once you're in the field, have a good idea of what it is that you want to do in the field, and be an innovator. I've been 20 years now, and I look the same way I did 20 years ago. So I suspect we're going to look at technology, how they can bring that to the forefront. How those in the field can be an asset to the agency, not necessarily somebody who wants to sit behind the desk all day or who wants to just collect a paycheck to do a job so they can and collect a paycheck to do what they do the job to do what they want to do elsewhere. So really love the job of doing something to that agency that are really going to make a difference in how we see corrections in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent interview. I think that those of you who are considering parole, one of the key things that I talked about earlier is getting involved, working in the field. I wanted to be a lawyer, and I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, so I volunteered in working with people who investigators. I volunteered to work with the lawyers. Even though I was not getting paid, it was still opening a door for me. And yes, the markets do get tight, and so as a result, those who they know and are familiar with have an edge and an inside track. That's why internships, that's why the field stuff that we do in some of my classes that I teach, such as critical issues in criminal justice, contemporary issues in criminal justice, where you have a field project similar to the project that you're doing here. It's immense in terms of getting you in. You notice that it's not a desk job. You're hardly ever behind the desk. And so as a result, you're a social worker. You should know, too, that the education requirements in most jurisdictions, I don't know any that are not, but the truth of the matter is that when you find yourself in situations where, whoops, cut myself off. When you find yourself in situations where you are involved, you want to make sure that you have some knowledge, some background experience and expertise. And so as a parole officer, a bachelor's is generally required, and because you're going to be doing a lot of counseling. So it's very, very, very important, and I think you probably discovered that from your research, those of you who chose to do parole as an assignment. So again, that was a good little piece. If you had trouble hearing it, go in and listen to it yourself. But I think you should be able to heard it pretty well. And so it's about 9:06. I've covered everything I need to cover about the topic of parole this week. I've already explained to you again the requirements for your project. Like I said again, you got one more to do, and that's the final one. Make sure that you satisfy all the requirements of the rubric and what's in the module, and then go back and refresh yourself with week 1 where you can see or either listen to the open house. The open house is extensive on the requirements from A to Z for this project. And so that's about it. So I'm going to say good night to you.